My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and today we're going to talk about using remote desktop technologies, VNC and RDP, for accessing an HMI remotely in a industrial control system environment. So my agenda today, we're going to talk about a bunch of things, the VNC, the RDP, the HMI, the acronym soup. So the first is we're going to go through the overview. What am I generally talking about? The second is I'm going to go through the W5, the who, what, when, why, and how. I'm going to go through what is remote desktop, why should you use it, when should you use it, who should use it, and how should you use it. I'll give you a little hint. Agilicus is part of the answer. I'm going to give you a brief demo showing how it's very simple to make this secure, and we're going to talk about that security model at the end. So just as an overview, I thought I would start out with this little video here. And this was something that came out last year. Let me click on it. My video is not starting. Okay, well, I'm not sure why the video is not starting, but I am going to, oh, there it is. So last year, there was a set of events that were attacks on the human-machine interfaces, specifically in the water infrastructure. And this was one of them. It was from what's called the cyber army of Russia, which we can assume might be Russian, but I guess there's also false flag things. And there's this sort of creepy intro, and then you see them clicking around on these two different HMIs here, and it doesn't look like they know what they're doing. They try to change a password, they click on a bunch of things, they change some levels, and at the end of it, they achieve a couple of objectives. So the first thing that they achieve is they scare people. What were they doing? Nobody's really sure. It's a very industrial looking interface. Were they able to change the chlorine level? Were they able to, et cetera? In this particular case, what they were able to do was to overflow some tanks. They changed some limit switches and turned some pumps on. There was also a couple of other HMI attacks last year, and one of them was in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. We saw a Palestinian message put on an Israeli-made device. The key to the message here is you have a lot of locations that are remote, and they have interfaces in them that you need to be able to look at to see that things are good, and you don't want to drive there. And somewhere along the line, somebody has wired it up to be more or less directly internet accessible. Maybe it's port forwarding, maybe there's a simple firewall, but they've done what they think is the right thing to do. And those human-machine interfaces, those HMIs, have negligible security, and then they show up and bad things happen. And then you get a lot of alerts coming out from the various regulatory agencies, CISA, FBI, CCCS, et cetera, saying watch out for that. So the overview of the problem today that we're talking about is that human-machine interface, maybe it's read-only, maybe it's read-write. If it is read-write, maybe it controls things that have safety and limit switches, maybe it controls things that don't, maybe it controls things that are safe, maybe it controls things that are dangerous. You don't really know. Well, you know when you have a specific one, but in general, one doesn't know. And you've got a set of domain experts that are needed using them when they need them. It's not like a PC you're sitting in front of it all day long, and you'd notice if somebody moved your mouse. Maybe you only use it once a day, and you come with a clipboard and you write down, how much salt is in the hopper. There's an alphabet soup of agencies that are recommending stronger security on here. And I just put a few of them down there, but this is from one of the alerts that came out last year, and they had a set of best practices in there. And we're going to talk about those best practices today. The big two remote desktop tools that are out there are Remote Desktop Protocol, Microsoft, and VNC, Virtual Network Computer. They each have some strengths and weaknesses, what they're good for, and I'm going to go through that a little bit today, and let's learn. So the what problem. What is remote desktop? So those two key protocols, there are many proprietary ones, TeamViewer, ConnectWise, etc. We don't recommend using those. They have their own authentication systems. They don't play nice with your firewall. There's no audit trail. Really, the two come down to Microsoft Remote Desktop and VNC, and they both achieve slightly different goals. VNC is really good when you need multiple people to interact with a session at the same time. You're doing multi-hands debugging, or you're helping somebody remotely, and they are on site and you're remote. But it also allows a read-only access, so that remote users can see but not touch. Microsoft RDP, obviously very tightly integrated to the Microsoft Windows ecosystem, but it's not just Microsoft. It does run on Linux as well. The VNC is on everything. It runs on Microsoft. It runs Windows. It's native on Mac. The Apple Remote Desktop is actually VNC, but it's also on a lot of the embedded devices. For example, the Rockview panel view is VNC based underneath it. When you have a device like that, you're not installing software on it, and it comes the way it did from the factory. It's got no username. It's got a very weak password, an 8-character password, and it's not case sensitive, and it's single DES encrypted, and it's really, really weak. We can make it so that that device can be used remotely, safely, securely, single sign-on, multi-factor, strong encryption. That's really what we're talking about. But what is remote desktop? It's just like being there. Keyboard, monitor, mouse, the remote over the network. You don't have to worry about does the application support remote or not. It just works. Why should you use it? So under what circumstances is remote desktop an appropriate solution? Well, it's efficiency. So you're saving travel and saving overtime. You're able to get a person, quote unquote, on site instantaneously rather than going through a travel booking agency. Remote support and diagnostic. You're working with an integrator, you're working with a vendor. Applications that don't support networks. So there are applications out there that are just a fat client that runs on a single machine, and there's no way to get it over the network. And this is the good tool to use that remotely. If you're a company that runs remote operations and asset management as a service, this is also a great solution. So, VNC, remote desktop, if you manage other people's networks, this is a really, really good tool for you. But the other one that we run into sometimes is just simple noise. I just finished doing a project where we went through all of the water plants for one of my customers, and there's a bunch of doors that say 105 dBA Class B noise required. And nobody really wants to go and put the things in your ear and then the big things on top of your ear and be inside that room all day. And there's an HMI in there you need to access. Well, you're not going to just sneak in there and read it quick and leave because it's loud, but you want to be able to get to it. Remote desktop can be just 10 meters remote. It doesn't have to be forever remote. It is a good solution for that problem. When should I use remote desktop? When should I use VNC? So there's no really good time here. So some people view it as an after hours thing. Well, when we're on site, we use the HMI physically, and when we're remote and on call, we use it that way. It's fine. If that works for you, that's a great solution. Sometimes you have someone who's on site who needs off-site assistance, a specialist. This is very common during the commissioning phase. You've got your integrator. There's a person that wrote the HMI graphical. There's a person that wrote the control system, the PLC software. There's a person that's on site running cables, and the three of them need to work together, but really don't want all of them there at the same time. Again, I mentioned that noisy or uncomfortable. You've got a location that has a certain type of PPE required, and you don't really want to wear it all day, but that's where the HMI is. This is a really good solution for that problem. Who should use it? Well, there's a wide group of people that should be using remote desktop technologies. So the first one is the operator, the noise case. I am the operator, I'm on site, but I don't want to be all day in that room. I just want to read this thing. The integrator, okay, I'm working with my customer and they're telling me that this thing is happening, which is incorrect, and we're trying to correct it together. And, maybe I'm going to change some parameters in a VFD or something of that nature. The vendor, well, I've sold you this equipment and there's a software upgrade we need to do together, or maybe the software update bricked it and I'm going to help you fix it. Management. There are use cases for remote desktop that aren't necessarily an HMI. You could imagine having a set of dashboards, in an industrial environment that roll everything up together. And maybe it's the alarm management system. You're looking at all the alerts. Maybe it's inventory. Maybe it's something of that nature. But there's a need for management there. And that might be a read-only use case. They have a need to see it, but they don't really interact with that dashboard. Third-party support. So somebody's calling you and walking you through how to do something. It's other training or whatever. But the key is it's a combination of both first-party and third-party users that have a legitimate ongoing need to have a remote environment, remote desktop, VNC. And these people, they might work for you. They might work for a partner of yours. They might work for a vendor of yours. They're all going to need that same seamless single sign-on, multi-factor. You don't want to be managing passwords for them because then they're going to forget them or they're going to share them. They don't want to do that either. That's really this group of users. You got to make their lives simple and they'll make your life simple. And then the how. I'm going to do a short demo in a second. I've been talking a lot, but how should they use it? Well, we propose it's predominantly a web-based experience, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. So first of all, every device that everybody has a browser in it. You know, this little sketch of this person here, he has a little tablet out. The tablet's got an antenna that's meant to draw attention that he may have just pulled over to the side of the road to check something at his customer, and he's using cellular for it. They should use single sign-on with their native credentials. So going back to, you know, I'm working with my integrator. So it's my opco and my integrator co, Dawn at my opco and Jane at my integrator co. They're going to work on this together. You don't want to have to create a parallel account for Jane, because that's going to mean opening a ticket and going through your IT system to get that done. It's going to take time. And you also don't want to have a shared account. Well, there's just the integrator account. Everybody signs in. Well, because then if somebody leaves that company and you don't change the password and bad things happen, you don't want to be the one in one of those videos. You don't want to be the one that something bad's happened, and you want to be able to confidently answer to your management. Yes, we allow remote access. Yes, we have a full audit trail. It's by person, not by company. I can narrow it down to who did what when, and I have multi-factor on that. So single sign-on is very important here. Via the web is very important here. Now, you can use the native tools for our platform, Microsoft TSC or Apple Remote Desktop, and some people prefer them for various reasons. Sometimes they can integrate better with like mounting a USB drive or something. But most of the users through our platform are using the web-based interface for it. And the other key is they should use it without a VPN. And the reason for that is, you know, think about blast radius. I've got a VNC to an HMI. The HMI can do the following things. So it can read and write this. It can turn a blower on. Can it turn a motor on? Can it turn on something that's human safety oriented? But with VNC, I've got certain users that are read only and certain that are read write. That blast radius is already hard enough to get your head around. You know, who's doing what when. But if the blast radius is, well, the VPN is to the whole plant, and if the user is either malicious or compromised, they could do more than we think. So it's not just about this one Rockwell panel view that's bolted in here. It's about what else is there. You know, have they put a bad USB key in their laptop, or there's malware just waiting, chomping at the bit to go wander around my network? That's what the VPN is doing for you. So you don't want that. You want instead single user sign in to single thing and know what they're allowed to do within it. And read only or read write as needed. So again, a remote support case, if they're just watching you and telling you what you've done wrong and they're on the phone, maybe read only is appropriate. If it's somebody making modifications, read write. And you can either do shared session where everybody's logged in and sees what everybody's doing, or single sessions. I'm going to switch and do a very brief demo here, and then we'll come back to the finishing this up. Oops, I'm going to share entire screen. Boom. So I'm going to show a hypothetical company, a city called eGov, mythical city of eGov. Everything's E because it's all electronic and online. And we'll show the sign-in experience. So this is a web browser. If I was doing it on my phone, it would be native to the phone. It would shrink to that format, or tablet, but this is a desktop. And I'm going to sign in. And you'll see I have a lot of sign-in options. And don't get, oh my God, there's so many. You have the ones that matter to your company, your partners. And typically it's just Google and Microsoft. Nearly everybody in the world either works for a company that uses Google Workspace or a company that uses Microsoft. And we're pre-integrated to those. There's no configuration. But some people use Yahoo or other things, and I've got them all in my demo here. So the first thing the user sees is this will be your HTML. And this is really important from a phishing standpoint, phishing protection. If the user sees a consistent sign-in experience to everything in the corporate world, then they start to recognize it. When's the little green checkbox and what's the URL up there? And they become part of your solution for phishing. So somebody can't send them a link saying, hey, we've changed our sign-in, put your password here. And the second is they're given a list of these different sign-in methods. We use Google Workspace, so I'm going to sign in with that. But I could sign in with my Apple account or my Microsoft account as well. These can be corporate accounts. Typically they will be, but they can also be personal. If you're supported by somebody and they don't work for a company, they're just a single contractor, you may have them sign in with their Gmail or their Outlook.com address. And the key is you can see in the URL bar, you're never going to see any credential information go to our system. We do not have the ability to see passwords. They're never presented to us. We don't have them stored. So here I'm going to sign in. I've only got one Google account on this machine. So I sign in. And again, in the URL bar, it's all through Google. It doesn't come back to our system. I've got multi-factor turned on. This can be done lots of different ways. You can have a USB key. You can have your phone chirp and say, is that you trying to log in? You can get a QR code. You could do the TPM on the system. Here, because I don't have my code loaded on this demo machine, I'm just going to really quickly use my code generator. So multi-factor, I'm going to take a little brief sideways switch while it loads. Multi-factor is any two or more of something you have, something you are, and something you know. So something I have would, in this case, my phone, a USB key, or the laptop. Something I am, that's my fingerprint, that's me, my face, my retina, or whatever. And something I know, a PIN, a password. You have to have two different categories. And the reason for that is the risk of them getting compromised is different. So for something I have to be compromised, it means somebody's stolen it from me. I left it on the bus. I forgot it in the Starbucks or whatever. That risk is different than somebody, I've used the same password in every system, it's been cracked by somebody. Those are very different risks. And because of that, they don't correlate. So when you need one from each category, there's no attackers that have both. So here I've just done a quick single sign-on with my Google, and I'm going to launch VNC in the browser. I could have launched it on the desktop, but in this case, boom, we're there. So that's how quick it is. I'm just immediately in a remote desktop environment, and we could have done a HMI that way. One of these is the HMI. So there's my HMI. We've got this one set to require sign-in again. That's more of a demo logistics thing than anything. So we've told it has to require a second factor every 4 hours. Some of our customers like that. They want, at the beginning of a shift, they force you to do second factor, and the shift is 8 hours, so they force it out at the end. But then here's a simple one, yada, 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 change some temperatures, etc. And from that, you could see it was very simple. That end user was able to sign in like that. They didn't know a new username and password. You can send this link out. They'll only see the icons for the stuff that applies to them. So if you're working with an integrator on panel 1, and there's one VNC in panel 1, they're going to have one icon. You're going to email them and say, okay, you can sign in now with your regular sign in like you do with your corporate email, and boom, they're there using it with you. That's how simple it is. Let's talk a little bit about why this is secure. So everybody is very nervous, and rightly so, about the idea of an industrial control system, SCADA, and the internet. Near the twain shall meet. We should have a perfect air gap with a bunch of people with rifles around it, etc. But then they have the problem that the SCADA system's been getting more complicated over the years. It used to be, it was more or less the same as the thermostat in your house. It was an on-off switch that had one thing. And all of a sudden, you've got an army of little sensors feeding back in through this distributed control system. And you've got PLCs that have hundreds of I/O outputs, and they're running a VFD with variable motors here and there. And there's all this stuff going on. And suddenly, you've got domain experts. It used to be that one person knew it all. And then you had just a SCADA expert. And then now you have a PLC ladder logic expert and a HMI expert. And you need to bring those people together periodically for something. So the needs for remote access are growing. The other one that's driving it is big data. So people are saying, well, I've got all this data, these sensors, there's all this AI and mumbo jumbo and big data, and then that all means cloud. So it's about getting data out of the system as well. Getting data out is more or less as hard as getting data in. You got to know who's allowed to do what and where it's going. VNC, I love VNC. Been using it for a long time. I was at a presentation where the guy unveiled his initial version of it. It worked for all of Eddie Labs. This was at, I don't want to say the age, but X Technical Conference 1995 in San Jose. And this guy gets up on stage. He says, I'm so-and-so from all of Eddie Labs in the UK, and we have this system. We have this one wireless button, and I can walk up to any desk, and I sit down and press the button, and my extension moves there, and my desktop moves there, and it's magic. Any questions? Everybody went bananas. This is the best thing we've ever seen. VNC has negligible native security, and that's really putting it kindly. That simple 8-character password with no username that has effectively the type of encryption that can be broken by a used video card in a second is not very good. it cannot be directly put on the internet. No matter how strong you make that password, it's single des encrypted, and it can be cracked bingo bango fast. So we come along and we act as a proxy in front of it, and we enrich that with end-to-end encryption, so TLS 1.3. It has no encryption. We enrich it with single sign-on via native identity provider, so every user, no new password, is able to just use it with multi-factor authentication, and enrich it with this idea of the read-only role. It allows VNC to be secure. And the same is true for RDP. RDP it's very complex to use in an industrial environment. Microsoft has a lot of strengths in here that aren't in VNC, but usually the SCADA PC that sits on in the corner that's a little bit damp, that you know what I'm talking about, it's not domain joined, and it doesn't have certificate authority, and the clock is off by about half an hour, and there's a bunch of stuff that's wrong with it. As a consequence, all that stuff that Microsoft created, it doesn't work. And we did the same thing for it. This identity-aware proxy is able to make it so that I know who's doing what, when, and there's, encryption and multi-factor and single sign-on, and it just makes it easy. All the security stuff gets out of your way unless you do your job. So if it's a SCADA PC running something like iFix, RDP is probably your use case there. If you want to have multiple people seeing it and talking about it at the same time, VNC is probably your use case. If it's a Rockwell panel view that you've got in a cabinet, VNC is probably your use case. But either way, they're equally secure once we're on the table. So how do we do that? Well, there's a concept called zero trust. I've talked about it enough that I feel that some of you might have heard of this, but it's basically, it sounds very complicated. There's been huge documents written on it. There's a NIST standard on it, et cetera. But it's three main swim lanes. There's the identity swim lane, the who. Who are you? If I know who the user is down to an individual level and not a company level, so it's not the Siemens account, it's the Jane at Siemens account, then I have the first column satisfied. That's that single sign-on. The second is the authorization problem. What are you allowed to do? The what problem. So it's fine to say, I know who Jane is, but now what is Jane allowed to do? Jane is allowed to touch VNC2, but not VNC3. Jane is allowed to change parameters on this panel, but not that panel. So that's the what problem. You own that. So in our system, in our model, you delegate the identity to the best-in-class providers, Google and Microsoft, and the companies manage their users within it. But then you decide what they're allowed to do. So you trust that Microsoft is not lying to you to say this person is who they say they are, but then you verify that they're only doing what they're allowed to do. And the last thing is the how, the access problem. How do I get you to that? So in the example I gave in my demo, it was all web-based, and we were able to get something inside an air-gapped environment that only had outbound network connectivity. Maybe it's even behind Starlink or something with NAT, who knows, but there's no VPN in, there's no inbound firewall, there's no port forwards. When you do an Nmap scan, it shows up as a black hole in the internet. That's what you want. So if you have who, what, and how solved by person and resource, you have zero trust. That's all zero trust means, is that you don't intrinsically trust physically where they are or the network they're on, the Ethernet cable or the VPN. You re-verify the trust on a per person resource basis intersected with fine-grained permission, and then you have an audit trail. The high-level end-user view, I kind of showed you that earlier. I didn't show the admin view, but it's all web-based. They open their tablet, their phone, their whatever device they're happy with. If it's company issued, that's great. If you allow bring your own device, that's great. If it's a third party, it's whatever they manage. But it's their existing company login. They're not going to share that. It's when you create the Siemens account, they're going to share that everywhere. But when it's their own name in it, it is much less likely to get shared. So, and the multi-factor makes it difficult or impossible to share. You own the authorization. You own what they're allowed to do. You allow them to own who they are. And then for narrow task-based users, I'm not talking about your IT team that needs access to everything here. I'm talking about the person, the technician that is working on a single task right now. They see the task, the equipment as a single icon. They click on it. They do their thing. They can be connected to multiple customers at the same time. This is another thing that comes up with our remote operations partners. I'll let you in a secret. Every industrial plant in the world uses the same IP addresses on the plant floor. Nobody knows why. It's a mystery, but they're all private IPs. It's 10.something or 192.something. And plant A and plant B, even within the same place, they might use the same addresses. When you're using a VPN technology, you need to be on that network. So therefore, you can't be on two networks that are the same IPs at the same time because they would collide. With our system, we don't have that problem, which means that if I'm doing remote operations, I can look at VNC1 at site 1 and RDP1 at site 2 simultaneously, or in cycle without having to disconnect, re-IP my machine, and so on, which is great. So the advantage here, it's secure for me, it's simpler for all. So the operator gets higher security, the end user, it gets a simpler experience. Remote desktop makes a really simple experience. Now, it's not as great to use it on a mobile phone. So in a pinch, you can pull over and, if it's a Rockwell panel view, it's going to be just fine because the mobile phone's about the same size as the screen anyway. But when you're talking about bringing up something like iFix or something, it's going to be a little bit more of a pain in the ass. But it is the technology that's there. So remote desktop, VNC, use it where it's appropriate. I went through the what it's good for, when you should use it, why you should use it, who should use it, how you should use it. But at the end of the day, this is a non-zero sum game. Everybody wins. The end user says, this was so easy for me. I'm tired of all the other plants I support, have these complicated remote access methods. I have to call and ask for permission from the person on staff, and they have to open a ticket, and it goes to IT, and IT closes it 2 days later with missing information, and then we repeat. And suddenly what was supposed to be a 2-minute activity has become a 3-week activity, and people are angry about it for some reason. I'm just trying to get my job done. And then you say, look, it's more secure. I used to have this thing called VNC, and this guy called Don told me I was going to get blown up by the Russians tomorrow, and all of a sudden I've got TLS 1.3 with perfect forward security and elliptical curve cryptography, and I've got single sign-on, and I've got multi-factor. I moved into the 22nd century of security, even though the thing is one in Windows CE from the mid-90s inside this panel. It's more secure for me. It's simpler for them. We've both won. Usually somebody has to win and lose like poker, but this is non-zero sum. The end user got simpler, security got higher. You can have multi-factor even in an air gap. That's what it's all about. The implementation needs are very straightforward. A lot of people think, oh my God, I'm going to need to put a Gantt chart together and have a project manager, and we're going to be installing, over the course of the next 2 years, and there'll be scheduled outages. And I'm here to tell you, no, we can do it in the time I've spent 27 minutes on the phone with you, on the video with you. And in that 27 minutes, I could have had all the VNCs in your plant lit up and the first users externally having tried them, because there's nothing to install, almost. You install our connector on one machine on your site, the rest is run as SaaS. There's a little web interface. You go and you add your users, you create some groups, you create permissions, and boom, they have that profile. There's nothing to install for the end user at all. They can just open it with their existing browser. You don't have to go to your IT team for permission and ask, can I install some software on the desktop, because it's a browser. And you'll have unified authentication. Every user has single sign-on immediately. You don't have to go and integrate something in your Active Directory or something. You have precise authorization. So every user, you're able to say read only, read write, after 2 p.m., only with multi-factor, whatever the authorization is, you're going to be able to keep them on the things they're allowed to access, which means if they do something wrong or something stupid or something gets stolen, you know the blast radius. And that's really important, is what bad things could have occurred based, okay, they had complete malware on the machine, somebody had a gun to their head, how far it could have gone. That precise authorization is your tool there, and there's an audit trail with it. And then they have seamless access, so the user's not complaining, oh, it breaks my printing when I connect to you, or I can't install your VPN because it conflicts with this other one this other customer I support, or I don't have a license for it. Are you going to buy it, or am I going to buy it? Well, wait a minute, I'm going to bill it back to you with an uplift. It just all goes away. The implementation could be done in the now 28 minutes that you and I have been talking today. So last slide, call to arms. Recognize this growing underserved. Things are getting smarter and more specialized and more online. Security is getting more important. There's actors out there that are skilled and interested in your environments. It used to be that didn't occur. You had no money and you had nothing very interesting to steal because you're not a bank. But all of a sudden, a water treatment plant becomes interesting when you end up with geopolitical tensions, state actors. Lateral traversal, getting in and going through it, it's getting more costly for you. We fix all that. Understand that the VPN is not an appropriate solution for everybody. It can't work, or they can't install with their software. They use a tablet and it's not available for the tablet or whatever. And it gives you that lateral traversal risk of getting in and going sideways. And understand that single sign-on and multi-factor is for everybody. It's not just for your team. It's for everyone. You shouldn't be thinking, okay, we've secured all of my staff and now have all these integrators, screw them for security. They're logging into your network. They're tracking stuff in the door. They may as well have the same simplicity and security your team does. I've said a lot of stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in. I think Drew has pasted a couple of links there to things that I've talked about in this webinar, you feel free to paste a question in here or email me afterwards or put something in my calendar, or if I can see it from where you are, a smoke signal, don@agilicus.com. I'd love to hear from you, even if it's just to say, this point you got it wrong, or you forgot to quote Reagan in the trust but verify. I think that would have been really cool in the zero trust slide there, or something like that.